Welcome to the Classics and Chill introduction to Shakespeare's Sonnets. I have a few things that I want to walk you through before we move into the poems themselves, just to make sure we're all on the same page. Above all, do not feel bad if you don't get the sonnets right away. It doesn't mean you're stupid. It doesn't mean that it's too difficult to understand. These are love poems that the receiver was supposed to read 100 times and over and over and over and over, several times, okay? So you're not supposed to get it after one read. I like to think of them kind of like an artsy movie, one you have to watch a few times to piece together all of the moving parts. And remember, Shakespeare wrote these 400 years ago, so there's going to be things we don't understand, cultural references we don't understand, words we don't understand. So take a breath. You're not going to get it right away. And that's okay, okay? Now, it might seem like us on the podcast, and I in particular, get the sonnets right away, but I've read them all many times, and the other people on the podcast, on the videos, have read the ones that they are reading before as well, and even we don't get them 100%. They're not easy, but they're not impossible, and they're worth it, okay? Most of the words, I would say 90% of the words that Shakespeare uses are words that we know, words that we use, words that I'm using right now, but there are a few that we don't know. Some are just archaic that you might have to look up, that I might have to look up, that everybody would have to look up, but some are super common, and so it would help us to go through them now before we start. Thy and thine both mean your, as in your pet dog. Thy pet dog. Thy is singular, thy pet dog. Thine is plural, thine pet dogs. Okay? Thee and thou are you, but they're used in different parts of the sentence. This is not super important, but I'll just explain why they exist. So if I were doing something to you, like if I were giving you a present, I might say, I gave a present to thee. Thou is used as the subject in the sentence. So thou are going to high school, okay? You are going to high school, thou are going to high school. Although that might sound weird to you, and that's because he probably wouldn't use are, he would use art, which just means are. Thou art going to high school means you are going to high school. Easy, right? So when you see those thee, thou, thy, thines, just replace it in your head with you, okay? You, your. Cool. Ere just means before. It's just a little shortening of the word, usually just to fit in the syllable count that he's trying to reach. We'll talk about the syllables in a second. Don't freak out. They're not as important as you think. Wherefore means why. I know it's confusing. It looks like it says where, but it means why. So Romeo, Romeo, wherefore art thou Romeo? She's not asking where he is. She's asking why is he Romeo? As in, Romeo, Romeo, why do you have to be Romeo? Okay, so with all that in mind, Shakespeare isn't really complex or difficult because of its vocabulary. It's really difficult due to how much meaning he can pack in very few words. That's why you want to read it over and over, okay? Not just once. Read it at least a couple times before you give up. And don't give up, you can do it. Okay. This is going to sound controversial, but do not think too much about form. The form of a sonnet is 14 lines in iambic pentameter with this certain rhyme scheme of A, B, A, B, C, D, C, D, E, F, E, F, G, G. And that's all true, and that's fine, but it's not that important. Don't hate me. Teachers, they like teaching these things because they are true, and they can test them easily. They can ask you how many lines are in a sonnet on a multiple choice test. And it isn't testing interpretation, and there's no opinions in it, it's just a fact. So it's easy to test your knowledge. But it doesn't help you understand the poem. It just doesn't. It helps you know how many lines are in a sonnet, but that doesn't help you understand the poems that are about love and grief and longing and death. It's not about fitting 10 syllables in a line, okay? It's about real human experiences and emotions. And that's what you should be focusing on, not counting the syllables. So yes, it goes da-da, 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 and that's iambic pentameter, but it doesn't happen always. And How does that help you? It doesn't. Okay? So please just put that out of your mind. It's not going to help you interpret the poem. Shakespeare's sonnets were most likely written during quarantine for the plague, like the Black Death, and were probably written in the order they were published in, but we can't know for sure. It seems like they were published without his consent. We also can't know for sure who they are about, how he felt about the people the poems are about, or even if the sonnets were about his feelings at all, or if he made up a character, a narrator, to write these poems. Obviously, Shakespeare is well versed in making up characters, so that may be true. Sonnets, though, were usually quite personal, so it's hard to say. It's impossible to say. Shakespeare didn't leave a diary, unless these poems are his diary. So we don't know who they're about, we don't know how he felt about them, we can only interpret. Shakespeare wrote these sonnets a long time ago, 400 years ago, and then some. So there are some things in here that are outdated, particularly ideas about women, gender roles, etc. Just how it is. We can't really get around that. The views of Shakespeare are not ones that we condone 100% of the time. That's true of almost everybody. Keep that in mind. Okay, finally, and probably the most important point, is that poems can have multiple interpretations. So if something that we are talking about feels not quite right, and like you are looking at this poem and you feel like it says something else different than what we're talking about, cool. Can you pull out pieces of the poem to prove your point? Awesome. That means your interpretation is just as correct as mine. That's the way literature works. If you can prove your point with stuff from the text, you are correct. Just as correct as I am. When we talk about words, like maybe this word means this, maybe that word means that, we're just discussing, we're not trying to find the one right answer. There is no one right answer. That's what makes it fun. However, sometimes you have experiences with literature and literature people where they pull out these seemingly insignificant details and appear to make up some big symbol that the author is hiding, and sometimes it's true. I think that it's taught in a way that is hard to understand as a reader. We'll have videos about symbolism later, but when you're finding symbols on your own, don't reach too far. There's a medical saying that goes, if you hear hoofbeats, odds are it's horses, not zebras. It might be zebras, but if you hear hoofbeats, it is probably horses, and unless you have another piece of evidence that it's zebras, just stick with the horse thing. In medicine, that means that a cough, for instance, might be a symptom of some exotic, super rare disease, but more often than not, it's just the common cold. So stick with the horses, and then if you get another piece of convincing evidence, then you can go to zebras. So is a poem about falling in love with a person about love? Probably. Is it also about a fear of death? Maybe. That's a bit more on the zebra side. Can you find another piece of evidence that it's about death? Yes? Then maybe it's about both. I know that for some more left-brained people, it can be hard to have something that has so little of an answer. There's no one right answer. You can't use a multiple choice test to test your understanding of a poem, because there's more than one right answer. That might be scary, that might be unsettling, but just try to go into it with an open mind, okay? I really hope that you enjoy these sonnets. I find them really fun, and I think that you will too. And enjoy the sonnets. Bye! That was so dumb. Come, Patsy! Is the Holy Grail a Shakespeare reference?